share with you the story, the bizarre case of Rey Rivera. My computer has been super loud today, so the white noise you are listening in the background is just my computer, and there's not much I can do about that since I need the microphone connected to the computer to record. I want to mention before I get started with this video that there is going to be a new video for Patreon this week, and I am recording it today. It has to do with the case of Lena Chapin. Most of you know who she is. The random events around her disappearance and the horrible thought that there is somebody, we know the name, we know where she lives, we know she committed murder and likely murdered Lena, yet she's free. That is one of the most random cases I've ever run across this far. I've seen the fridge. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I am renting this space. They have a fridge to my right. Actually, two of them. So, excuse the randomness of this video. However, back to Lena's case. This is one of those cases that we know who did what. There's proof that she did it, but they cannot arrest her. Super random, but if you are part of Patreon, please check it out. It should be available. I think it's Friday, and I hope that you join me. For everyone that's been participating on my Patreon, I want to say thank you for the support, and I want you to know that I've been working extra hard to have the videos on Patreon and then some more, because I know that a lot of you guys really stayed while I had my little hiatus. So, just so you know, I appreciate you. Thank you for being there. Now let's talk about today's case that is on Rey Rivera. I saw a thumbnail from a Mile Higher podcast that they covered this case. I didn't watch that episode, or I didn't listen silliness and kind of his charming personality really reminded me of my son. I can't put myself for 2 seconds in Ray's mom and Ray's mother's position. That's where I draw the line. But you'll understand why. He was also very, very tall. He was 6'5" and 260 pounds. He was a super athletic guy, competitive, and overall he seemed the kind of guy that enjoyed being active and being outdoor. He was a water polo. Is it player? I don't know about water polo, but I'm assuming that's what it is. He played for a team, and he was also in the swimming team in his high school. You get the idea. He was active, he was fun, and he was close to his family. Later on in life, he met Allison and they fell in love. Soon enough, they went to Puerto Rico and they had the most beautiful beach wedding. Perfect in my eyes, the perfect wedding. But I love the beach, so. His dream was to be a writer and a director. So the couple was leaving after their marriage, and I'm not sure if that's where they met. I'm not 100% sure, but they lived in Southern California. He was trying to pursue his dreams of being a director, but really, it wasn't paying the bills, let me put it that way. So he decided to call one of his best friends, if not his best friend, altogether. His name is Porter Stansberry, and they were friends since high school, I think, since they started high school. But Porter was a big finance guy, and his company, Stansberry Associates, was in Baltimore. Now, the job was not necessarily something that Ray would love, but it would pay the bills. Basically, Porter wanted him to write financial letters, and even though Ray didn't know much about finances, he wanted to give his friend a chance, and he knew that he would do good. He just just was one of those things that maybe he didn't study for, but his friend knew that he would do well. So he took the job in Baltimore, and the plan for the couple was to stay there for 2 years. And they finally moved to Baltimore in December of the year 2004. They found a beautiful home, a great community, and a good church. They felt like they were home. That was a good decision at the time. A year and a half almost after they moved to Baltimore, it's when things changed forever. So on May 16th, 2006, Allison was going to be out for a few days on a business trip. That morning, she mentioned that she was extra tired, so Ray got up and made breakfast for both of them. She left as planned, and she worked all day until 6:30 p.m. when she was settling in for the night, she calls Ray, and he doesn't pick up the phone, which was odd for him. If I don't pick up the phone, I'm okay. I'm bad. Okay, I'm bad. But, those people that if you call them, they will pick up, or they will reply, or they will call back. It's my husband. My husband is that way. He can't see Facebook notification. He can't see new email, even if it comes from Best Buy, giving you a 2% off. He'll open it. Not me. And apparently Ray was that way. He was always by his phone, and he was always picking up. So Ray's wife, Allison, decides to call a girl that was staying with them. Now, this girl was described in the documentary as a colleague, but they never mentioned the work that Allison was doing at the time. Not that it's relevant, but it wasn't like somebody who lived with them, rather somebody who was staying with them. So this girl says, listen, the phone rang about 6:30. He picked up the call. He ran downstairs and left in a hurry. And I even thought to myself, that must be something really important. I mean, he ran out in the clothes that he was wearing with his flip-flops. Anyway, this colleague, Claudia, called the next morning. She called her friend, Allison, and said, listen, he hasn't come back. Then Allison knew that if he wasn't picking up his phone and he didn't come back for the night, she knew that something really bad had happened. So she gets in her car and drives back home. She started calling his family, people that they knew in their neighborhood, and wondering if they seen him or heard from him since yesterday. At this point, nobody has, so his brother Angel flies in from Orlando, and they start, printing flyers. It was kind of an immediate thing. They gather at Ray's and Allison's house, and they started calling hospitals, calling, police station, anything, anywhere that they could think of. They canvassed the area, the neighborhood, but even notifying the police, it was weird that, there was no activity in his credit card, no money pulled out of the account. So it was, again, very, very fast. And they decided pretty quickly that he didn't leave on his own account. He didn't plan to leave. The police also knew that he was 32 years old. He was happily married. He had a good life. He was a part of a good community. And why would anybody run from that perfect situation? According to the police, he wasn't involved in any kind of illegal activity that could have had something to do with his disappearance. 6 days after Ray disappeared, Allison's mom and dad were driving around different parking places in Baltimore, and they really were just looking for his car. Associates building, which is a place that he would go frequently, or a spot where he would park frequently when you'd go there. The police looked inside the truck, but there was no evidence, no theft of the vehicle, no physical evidence whatsoever. So they look at the Belvedere in South Baltimore City. The Belvedere was at one point the place to be at. If you wanted to show how good you were doing, you wouldn't go to any other hotel but the Belvedere. It was a high class kind of place. Now, just so you have an idea, because when you look at this place, it looks super old, and I don't know how to say it, but I don't know, it doesn't look like a high-end hotel. It doesn't look like a 5-star hotel. However, it was. And they started to look in the area. On May 24th, a couple of Rey's co-workers went to the roof of the Belvedere Hotel and found a hole in the roof and a flip-flop just by that hole, which was kind of telling. Now, they were looking down from the top of the hotel, and the hotel had the very top where they were. Then they had the parking place, also was kind of a roof area looking like. And then there was this other building that was lower from where they were at. And that's exactly where they found this hole. Now, before you start thinking that it was a big hole, or that a body could have fit, yes and no. I think that it was more telling, the idea that the flip-flops were by the hole, than the hole itself, I should say. You could fit through that hole, but you would probably have to go either head first or your feet first. Now, the Belvedere is a huge hotel with lots of windows, an old structure, different rooftops, again, as I mentioned before, including the garage. These co-workers called the police, of course. The police went in and asked to go to that particular building. They called it the old church space, and it was not in use. Sadly, they found the body with a horrible smell and blood spatter in the walls. He came right through a metal roof or metal ceiling. I don't know if it was the outside, the inside that was metal. I don't know, I'm not sure about that. But the family gets notified, and they couldn't believe what was happening. The autopsy, though, even though it was very decomposed, the body, it was pretty extreme, and it was very telling. It had multiple ribs fractured, punctured lungs, lacerations, very deep lacerations, a leg that was broken 2 places to the point that one of the bones was sticking out. I know. And so they determined that he fell from an extreme height. And that would be something like the very top of the roof of the actual hotel. still too far away, and it would have been impossible even for an athletic guy to make that jump. And it would have been something that no, it wasn't that high, so it wouldn't explain all the different things I mentioned in the autopsy. Then they said that he came from the 11th floor, which it makes sense. In the physics of things, well, let me explain. Apparently, they have a ledge there. I seen it. But how did he get there? He had to go through a room or an office, and there have windows. Some of them don't open, so he would have had to go into a room, which I don't understand why that would be so hard. It could have been unoccupied. I don't know, but they don't understand how he was able to kind of walk through this very tiny ledge and fall and jump or be pushed. It would be impossible for two people to be there at the same time and one be. It just didn't make sense to them, but out of the three, that's the one that makes sense in my head. But as you can probably tell, they had no idea, or they were not really sure how this happened. They found his cell phone and his glasses in the roof with no damage. So, how did that happen? If they did go down with him, how is it possible that they didn't break? They would have been destroyed. So they thought maybe somebody placed him there. A money clip was also missing and never found, and that was very sentimental. his wife and brother-in-law went through Ray's office, and they found this note that was super long, but it was shrunk into a tiny paper, and he stuck it to the back of the computer. Now, it was super odd, and he wrote it according to his wife because of some paper she found on the garbage, and according to her, he wrote it the day that he disappeared. I'm not gonna read it, I'm not gonna read the thing itself, but it started with something like, brothers and sisters, volcanoes are erupting around the world. What an awesome sight. Okay. An unusual note. Yeah. Movie stars names were there in that paper. Family member names. A list of people he knew. There was another part that said, I stand before you, a man who understands the purpose and value of our secrets. His wife looked this up, and it came back as a Freemasons. Somebody's talking right outside the door. Sorry. She said that he was curious. Allison said that Ray was curious about secret societies, and maybe that he was looking into something. He was writing or planning something, and other people thought, well, this is a code for something. But Allison explained that he had all kinds of what are they called? What you write for a movie, scripts, and that he would, get ideas from a random phone number, something he watched on TV, something he stumbled upon and that he had random thoughts that he probably planned to put in a script or something. The police determined that this was not a suicide note or intent. Now let's go back to the timeline so we can kind of wrap this up, at least in our brains, right? All we know is that he was working from home. He got a call and left in a hurry. Didn't take much with him. He left wearing flip-flops and the clothes he was wearing around the house. He parked in a hurry and vanished. We also know that the call, and I'm going to add the allegedly, came from Stansberry and Associates, and it came from a switchboard. Yeah, I'll explain that a little bit later, but because of that, they couldn't track the extension, and nobody said, hey, I called from Stansberry and Associates, his best friend's company. Now, I have to pause right there and tell you that I'm itchy in my face. Now, that this is something that the Netflix documentary made a point for you to know. Okay, so this is where I feel like that documentary is throwing shade at this company that Ray used to work for. Oh, and that's another thing. I'll tell you a little bit more in the end. Then, in the documentary, they said that they stopped cooperating, that the company lawyers gave a gag order to every employee, so they couldn't cooperate with the police anymore. So who called him? That made him leave in a panic. The police didn't have the grand jury powers to make them speak, so they stayed quiet. Porter eventually stopped answering the police calls. This is according to the lead investigator which I'm assuming he was going to be given the information and he was going to format it into whatever the newsletter would be at the time. But according to Allison, part of his work was to clean up after this big mess and kind of make Porter look good in potential future investors. Now, Allison, in the end of the documentary, or at the end, she mentions that something was up. 2 weeks before he died, Allison noticed that something was worrying Ray. On Monday, May 15th, 2006, the day before he went missing, one of the alarms in their house went off at around 1 a.m. It had never happened before. Allison went down and Ray did too. Ray had a bat, according to Allison, and he looked super scared. And for a big guy that looks fearless, that 100% of the time, that was kind of odd. The police went to the house, but they said that it was likely a squirrel. The next night, again. So she believes that somebody was trying to get inside the house. Then the next day he goes missing. His wife believes that he stumbled upon some information he shouldn't have. Or he shouldn't have had. And the motive for his murder, alleged murder, was money. Somebody lost a lot of money and blame it on him. Was he pushed? Did he do it to himself? But from where? And why? Even the police told Allison, please be careful. You can end up finding information about something and be the next target. Now, I put this segment as the real story, okay? The Baltimore Sun publishes an article on August of 2020 where they interview Porter, Ray's best friend, and he was shocked when he watched the documentary about his friend and how it painted him as a friend in his company. I have to say that Porter didn't want to participate in this documentary. I don't blame him, but I think that Netflix kind of got the wrong idea out of that. Porter claimed that he didn't want to talk about it because he never thought that this was a mystery at all. He said that he did meet with a detective on June 2006, and this was after the lead detective that told the family he was not cooperating left the case. He said he did everything he could to help in the investigation and that there is proof of that, and that Netflix didn't accuse him directly or his company of foul play because there's not them, but that it made him look super bad and that people were questioning his friendship to Ray and the willing of solving his mystery. Now there's another childhood friend of Ray, and he kept in touch with Ray and they were pretty close. They even worked together at Stansbury, so they lived in Baltimore at the same time and everything. And this friend said that Ray was struggling with mental health and that maybe that was part of what happened to him. There is even a book about Ray's death. It's called The True Story of a Body at the Belvedere by Mikita Brockman. Porter, Ray's friend, says that he has been threatened, his family too. His business has been struggling suicide from the beginning. And after looking at his finances and the quote-unquote facts, it pointed to that. Apparently, the gag order was really to the media, he said. They didn't want their employees talking to the media and saying different things that could incriminate something of the company or put the company in some kind of a problem. And they were told that when the media asked them anything about the case, to send them to the company's person. There was like a spokesperson for that. Again, Porter said that he did speak to the police after the lead detective that claims he wasn't cooperating was reassigned. Allison was told by the lead detective that left that he wasn't cooperating, but he actually was. It just happened after he left the case. Porter also makes clear in that article that Rey wasn't working for him anymore and that he resigned 6 months before his death. He said that when he resigned, he was not sure what he was going to do, but he didn't want to continue to write the newsletter. He also said that the call didn't necessarily come from his company, the one that Rey got that day, and that the Netflix documentary made it seem that way. Apparently, that switchboard that they were talking about in the documentary was used for several different other companies, but one of them was Porter's company, so it could have come from any other company that were under that same switchboard. Porter also said that it would have been impossible for somebody to call from his building, from his company, because they were in an Eastern Shore retreat in St. Michael's, and no one was in town, so it would have been virtually impossible for somebody that was working to call him. The offices were closed. He also mentions that Rey had asked him previously if he was in leadership of the Freemasons, and that he thought immediately that Rey was joking, and he laughed it off. He also said that Allison told Porter that the Saturday before he disappeared, he didn't want to get out of bed and that she was worried about his mental state. Porter said that Rey was saying some odd things to different people, not only him, but that he took it as a joke or not seriously, as most people did at the time. Porter said that he even mentioned the film Eyes Wide Shut. Allison was asked if she remembered having this conversation, telling Porter about that Saturday when he was depressed and didn't want to get out of bed. Allison said that he didn't remember telling him that, which didn't clarify if that happened or not. She said that she didn't remember telling shared it in the documentary. So I guess that goes to show that sometimes, and I've been called out on this several times, on a specific case. I don't know if you guys remember. Gosh, I can't remember the last name of the couple. There's even a creek that I went by recently that has their last name. Is it Wash? What? Oh gosh, I can't remember. I'll put it on the screen and I'll have the video down below. But after I shared that video, I got an email from somebody who claimed to be part of their family and said that the documentary and the information that was out there was not 100% true, and that the documentary people kind of went with one theory, leaving out a lot of other evidence that would point to a different direction, almost like they were channeling everything to show who murdered this couple, which, by the way, in that case was the son. He's in jail. I don't know what's happened with his case. But this person was telling me, like, okay, there's proof that he didn't do it. There's this and there's that. And I looked it up. And yes, there was other things being said on Reddit. But nothing from a media source or from the police or a report. It was more like, okay, there is no evidence, apparently, and this is what it is, but nothing like, okay, this is what happened and this is a correction. Or it's not like the Peterson's case, like, okay, now we know there were 6 other burglaries or 6 other incidents that happened that day on Christmas Eve when she disappeared. There's proof of that. But the things that were saying in this case, this person that claimed to be a family member really didn't. But looking at different documentaries and how they try to find, they try to lead you to a person that you kind of hate at the end of the documentary. It's something that they do, and it's pretty typical in a documentary. So I thought that if you watch Rey's documentary and you got the idea that maybe his best friend's company had something to do with it, and that they looked very, very suspicious, and that, whoever called him was at the company, and, all those things that were half-truths, because they were half-truths. Yeah, they did call from a switchboard, like they said, but Stansbury was one of the companies that was under that switchboard. So I feel like in this case, the documentary left a lot of half-truths out, and so you didn't get a bigger picture. And I guess it's also because Porter didn't want to cooperate. This is according to Netflix. He didn't say it in that specific article, so don't quote me on that, but in the documentary it is said that he didn't want to cooperate. So I really don't know. I have no idea. But it's just one of those things that there's a bigger picture now, and maybe we should all consider this and take the next documentary with a grain of salt. I feel like Hollywood profits way too much from cases that are unsolved, and that by finding somebody that looks suspicious, attract more people to the documentary. But if that person was in fact somebody who the police consider as a suspect, they would have done something. They would have looked into it, and if they did and was nothing, it's kind of hard to arrest somebody that you have no proof did it. What do you think? I'll tell you what I think. I that's why you can't see it in their face. And if you combine that with some kind of an illness, mental illness, then you have the recipe for disaster, if you ask me anyways. So does it matter what I think? Not really. I think it's hard to accept when somebody and there was an explanation how the cell phone got there. They kind of expanded on that when they tried to rule it as a suicide, but it wasn't ruled a suicide. I think that people that spent a lot of time with him, like Porter and this other friend of his, could see right through it because they knew him for such a long time that they could tell the signs. Can I be wrong? 100%. Maybe somebody did push him. But there's also the possibility that somebody said something upsetting or that was going to change his life, and he decided